Hello everyone, welcome to night 13 of book 2 of the Orphan's Tales Live quarantine reading series. I look different tonight because I'm so hot I'm gonna die. I can't wear that long sleeve shirt right now. It's 95 degrees outside. That's not an exaggeration. I am boiling. And I forgot a drink because I'm that awesome. I'm just dying. I can't have my bangs in my face. I can't have that shirt on. I know we've kept it so consistent for 5, almost 6 months now, but like I just can't do it tonight. And I'm gonna go up in a sad little pinwheel of smoke. Yes, I have shoulders. They exist. So yeah, I apologize. I was trying to keep that consistency, so it was like it all happened on one night, but this is the night that I gotta wear like an 80s hairband and give up. You can see how giant my face actually is without bangs. Yeah, it's just it is roasting hot today, and I have to have the AC off in order to do this. Otherwise, all you would hear is the rushing of air conditioning behind me. So it is what it is. It's got to be this way. I apologize for my dorky pink headband. Hi. Welcome to August, which is usually when it's cooling down in Maine, and it's just yet another over 90 degree day. I don't have a brain. I'm like a Terry Pratchett troll. I literally get dumber when it's hot, which is great because I'm probably going to be finishing a novel tomorrow, so it's definitely going to be a good ending when I'm like 50 IQ points down from it being too hot. But that's okay. You know, it is what it is, as the president says. Good to see everyone. Oh, I am brought a drink by the Drink Fairy. Thank you, Drink Fairy. Oh, you guys, it's too hot. It's just too hot. It's too hot. No one can stand this. And I'm reading like the cold part of the book where everything's cold, miserable. We're getting to the unmiserable part though. It's all gonna get shiny and sparkly from here on in. I hope. There's probably some burning too. It's the fire portion of the book. Yeah, so I'll do my intro stuff and we'll hope for the best. Oh God, can I even remember my intro stuff? I'm so hot. I'm so hot. I moved to Maine to get away from this. I grew up on the West Coast in like California and Seattle. I didn't want this. Ugh, gross. Okay. What's my name? Why am I here? I literally can't remember what I say. This is not an audiobook. This is a play. Yeah, so for legal reasons, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This is a one-woman show. You can get music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can get copies of them at your local independent booksellers web portal. Oh, this is going to be a great reading tonight, I can tell. Oh, I got a popsicle. That's better. Just put it on my forehead. Yeah, you can see my ring light. You can get them at your local independent booksellers web portal. My local independent bookseller is printbookstore.com if you want to patronize them. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valente. See, I'm getting smarter as I cool down at Cat Valente. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valente. The novel's going to be done tomorrow, so all kinds of rewards are coming. You can ask me questions after this is over. I don't promise the answers will be coherent in any way, but there will be answers. Best if you put them in the comments while I'm reading, and that way there's no dead air at the end of all of this. The lipstick is Pumpkin Memories? Something about pumpkins by Fangoria? No, that's not it. I just literally can't think of anything. I'm sorry, I'm loopy. Okay, and you can catch up in the archive at Cat Valente Live. If you're watching this on YouTube, you would have fast forwarded through all of this anyway because you're tired of hearing it. And you can, if you would like, contribute to the Keep Cat and Her Family Alive Fund by tossing a coin in the witch's hat, which is a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and my website, which is catherinemvalente.com. Remember that my name's spelled funny. You don't have to. These are free. But I put makeup on at night for you guys, even though my face is melting off like one of the dudes in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I slapped paint on it for you. And anything you can contribute is deeply appreciated. Thank you so much to Crystal, Annette, and Victoria who tipped me last week. You guys are amazing. You are absolute rock stars. It means so much to me. You cannot possibly know. And thank you to anyone who contributes, and I will thank you by name on the next stream. Okay, it's time to put my life-saving popsicle down. We're going to finish the Book of the Storm. I think that's what it's called. I wrote it, but I wrote it when I was cool. We're going to finish the Book of the Storm tonight, and so this may be a slightly shorter one, because obviously that's where we'll stop when it's over. And then we will pick up with the Book of the Skald on Sunday night. So we are just about exactly halfway through this thing. We're on page 232 if you're following along at home. So we have that beautiful, almost exactly 50% through. Roll that beautiful book footage. That's an old commercial reference for those of you who are not an old woman like me. Okay, here we go. Looking stupid, way too hot, reading fairy tales. I'm sorry guys. I'm so hot. I just cannot deal. I wish I could shave my head right now. Like, having my hair down is just like a curtain of heat. Okay, here we go. Think cool thoughts. Isle of the Dead. Dead thoughts. Cold dead thoughts. All right, here we go. The tale of the crossing continued. How is it even possible in this place? Zemaya cried, cradling her stomach in her arms. What will come out of me? I was born with the dead for midwives, a dead mother, a dead father. Oubliette looked down in shame. Tears were hot on her face, steaming the air. She glanced up at Seven ruefully. I'm sorry, she said. I wanted to serve you, to save her, the tea girl. I was just silly. Zemaya's face softened, shades of green playing over her cheeks. Oh, I don't blame you, poor thing. You're so lost, too. Can I help but tease you for those great hungry eyes, for all those things you said when you came here squeezing your little leaf? But why would you not eat at my table? Snake Star moved forward to hold the Huldra's head in her hands. Oubliette laughed and wiped at her tears. Anyone who has read a book in her life knows not to eat the food of the dead, she answered. The two women embraced briefly, as though they did not want to embarrass their visitor. Seven felt the weight of how much she had seen and done without him pulling at her sleeve. Why do they love you like this? He demanded. They startled back away from his frayed voice. Why does everyone fling themselves at you, just praying you'll catch them? Immaculata, Oubliette, they gave up everything just for you. Zemaya looked at him over Oubliette's bent head. I don't know, she hissed. Who knows why you do anything? You look at us and call us gods and sacrifice your seventh sons on altars we know nothing about. You build up towers we never asked you to build. With your other hands you slaughter us and tell us that wood is too fine for the likes of us and rape us until our legs crack. How should I know why some few of you fail to mutilate us? But if those few fling themselves at me, what can I do but catch them? Who will do it if I do not? If I turn them away like bad children who ought not to trouble their betters? They are not your children to catch. Tell them that, and then tell me to turn away a girl who cuts into her body for my sake. Tell her she is not welcome. There are already too many sisters here. We have no room for more. The one-armed boy turned to his friend with eyes that pleaded and prostrated. Was I not brother enough? Oubliette glared at him. There are some things you never get over, she spat. You left Taglio and Groteschi without a word. Were they not family enough? Have you thought at all of them, how they might miss you, how they might wish you had stayed? If they are closer to Agenat, within its gates, if Groteschi is even now singing at shuttered windows. Seven said nothing. That is how often I have thought of you, she finished. In the garden. The twilight was thin and wispy over the lake. The girl's skin was warm under her cloak, but the boy trembled. When you finish the tales, he said, when your eyelids have poured out all their ink between us and the garden is black with them, will you leave me as Oubliette left Seven? As Seven left the Gacelli and the Manticore? Will you go off to a place I cannot touch and never think of me again? He swallowed hard. Or will you remember that once there was a nice boy who was not afraid of you, and walked in the garden with you, and listened to you, and did not interrupt more than is polite? Will you sit at a table of blue crystal with parrot wings for legs, fabulous monsters all around, eating lunches of leek and rose, and think to yourself, I wonder whatever happened to that boy? Where is he now? Is he married? Is he fat? If he has kept the garden well trimmed. He could hardly look at her. His hands shook like brown cattails. The girl scowled at him. When I finish the tales, when my eyelids have poured out all their ink into your hands and I have nothing left for myself, will you run back to the palace like a good prince and leave me to my fate, just as Hind left the beast who loved her? Will you go into rooms at whose doors I am not even allowed to knock and never think of me again? Or will you remember that there was once a nice girl who did not ask too much of you, and walked in the garden with you, and told you stories that made your head swim with all manner of strange fishes, and thought so much for your safety that she taught you all the secret places that were once hers alone? Will you sit with a sultan's turban and crown on your head, a sultan's bangle at your wrist, at a golden table borne up by the backs of perfumed slaves, and think to yourself, I wonder whatever happened to that girl, where she is now? Is she married? Is she fat? Has she made friends among the demons? Neither of them spoke for a long while, the air between them heavy and sad as old rain. The girl clenched her teeth against the reassurances that yearned to come. They were soft and sweet and untrue. She did not know, how could she know, what would happen. I think, the boy said, that I would bring supper out to these stones, out to this lake, for 50 years, for all of my reign, in hopes that you would come back with fresh ink on your eyes, and new marvels to tell. I would take down all the garden gates, and someday there would be an old, white-haired man with green apples and roast dove in his napkin, sitting by the water, and asking himself whatever happened to that girl. She smiled and touched his hand. The bird of pearl sat between them, unconcerned. We have the whole night, she said. The moon is not even up. Shall I finish the tale of that awful, lonely isle? Yes, the boy breathed. The tale of the crossing continued. The child was long in coming. Seven joined Oubliette in one of the long, empty grey houses. There were 2 windows with 2 long beds and a low, rough table, but she would not let him eat the apples and plantains and pomegranates that were laid out there. Who left us this? Seven asked. The Holder shrugged. They tend to credit Idle for anything strange and bright that does not come from them, but who can say? The second bed is new as well. Maybe no one. Maybe it grows from the table, like a sprig of holly from a holly bush. Maybe this is a house bush. It blossomed up a new bed for you and supper. She crooked a smile, and things went easier between them then, though they both wondered how long they could last without eating the rich red meal that each evening sat shining on the table. They slept separately for half a single night before Oubliette crawled in beside her friend like a wary cat. In what passed for mornings on the isle, one of the Ito twins might come and take them to see how the wispy lights of Zemea's children wheeled along the forest floor, playing like butterflies or finches. Diamond might come with one of her sisters to bring sticks of fire to each of the house's hearths, should the houses have hearths that day. They were odd, intractable shacks who might offer a fire grate once and, if rebuffed, withhold them from everyone for weeks. So when the hearths appeared, the stars hastened to please them with sparks and crackling logs. Yet no matter how often Seven and Oubliette politely told their house they were not hungry and did not care for fruit, there it was the next evening, fresh and new and sparkling. Sometimes Zemea herself would come, with a kind, distracted smile, and her teeth were sometimes green and sometimes red, and her face soon enough familiar to them as any neighbor's who often comes to borrow sugar or soap. Once she took them far into the aisle, into the bare forest, and showed them a little clear pool. She placed her finger on the water, and it swelled up with brown leaves, tea leaves, swirling thick and fast in the shape of a woman's face. A woman's face the color of the sole of a shoe, the color of oolong and lemon peel. The face wept sweet brown tears to see Zemea, and more to hear the mortal pair tell of Taglio and how he fared in the world. Oubliette and Seven thought that thin, warm voice was the loveliest thing they had ever heard. At other times, Zemea would take them walking down by the shore and show them a firm stone path among the blinking eyes which Seven had not seen, and they would watch the horizon for a sign of the ferry. There were algae on the lashes of the eyes, but the sandpipers did not come out that far, and only once or twice did they hear an owl, or a thrush, or the weird whooping cry of a hoopoe. The lake was vast. The other side could not be seen, and when it rained, which was often, the water and the sky blurred into one great grey globe. Seven repaired the dock as best he could with no tools and one arm, which is to say not very well, but the effort was appreciated. Oubliette painted it with a mixture of boiled bark and beach tears. It glowed ghostly in the water, and after a time, as was surely inevitable, the raft appeared within the great grey globe, and the ferryman brought a woman to the valiantly mended dock. We have a demonstration here. She was not yet a crone, but tending toward it as a weather vane will veer toward an easterly wind. She had long grey wings where her arms ought to have been, and her feet were webbed and yellow. Her hair was dark and streaked with wide bands of silver feathers, the thick black strands clearly losing their battle against the bird. There were well-grooved lines at her deep, wide eyes and at her mouth, but she was thin and nimble as a goose in flight, and her cheeks were whipped and flushed by the lake gales. Her gait was businesslike and brisk, her fingers long and purposeful, pushing back her fog-damp hair from her forehead. Her gaze went immediately to Zemea's swollen stomach. "I see I am needed," she said. Her voice was rough, as though she had been talking without cease for years on end. Zemea covered her belly with one long green arm. "How long," she murmured, "do you think it takes a child to grow inside a dead woman?" "As long as it pleases, I expect," the stranger said with a bemused grin. Idle glanced at Seven and Oubliette and opened his mouth as if to say something, but closed it again. Finally he grunted. "The dock looks better. Shoddy joint work, though." He slowly poled away from the shore and into the mist. The water lapped behind him, a sound like an infant crying far away. "Well," said the newcomer, "that's done with. Now, mistress of snakes, pig slayer, star of the jungle, your brother is worried about you." The Midwife's Tale. In my younger days, I was a goose. This is nothing to gawk at. Geese are quite common in my country, which lies as far to the east as ice flows to the north. When we moved through the sky, we were like a hand passed over the face of the sun, and the forests were in shadow. My name was eerie then, as it is now. But that was a long time ago. Now I am a woman, and my flock is gone, and my brother was a king for a time. Perhaps you have heard this story. It is not so common as tales involving ravenous snakes, but some few minstrels still sing about the goose girl and how she and her brother killed a tyrant. My brother did not love a lonely chair in a lonely castle, and went long ago to join the patricides in Alinor, where he is at peace and wears a red habit. I was not there with him when he took his vows, though he sent men to find me to all the corners of the world to beg me to come home. But that place, that castle with its rivers and its secrets, was not my home, and I hid when I heard them call. They told him that they found geese and girls, but not both, and with a bent head he went out of the world and out of our story. I went to find the thread of our mother's tale and tuck it back into the stitching. Thus I found a quest after all. Perhaps it runs in the blood. I chased the tale into the high mountains, tipped with snow like wise men's beards, and down to the sea laid before me smooth as a dress. The world is wider than anyone guesses. It took years, and along the way I had something like the education my great-grandmother might have given me. I learned the ways of the grass and leaves, which I learned how to make love potions and cold cures and gout softeners for those who could pay me, and look up to the sky to tell a young girl whether her husband would have light or dark hair, and to deliver her baby when the time was right for it, and to bury her when the time was right for that. Silver came again to my temples, a silver like feathers. I did not mind the time or the distance. That is what an education means. Finally, I went where I ought to have gone to begin with, to a burnt-out ring of trees and old huts half reclaimed by golden grasses, where a wildcat hide was still hanging on a branch, and goose feathers blew like ashes through the paths that led from hut to hut. How many times the flock must have come to this place to mourn themselves. The blackened dome frames smelled of horse tallow and scorched wood. The sun was bright and hard as I walked through the ruins, the old red sash of lucrata skin flapping against my hips. The place was not even big enough for anyone to plunder, and I wept for my mother for the 1000th time. When the sun had drained itself into the western hills, I heard a colt snort in the distance and found not far off a small black horse chewing the long, dry grass. It was not special. It was not the great black mare I longed to see, but it was not afraid of me, and it nosed my pockets for apples. Ascertaining I had none, it trotted off, and with a horsewoman's logic I followed after. Soon I was at a dead run, streaming sweat just to keep her in sight. Often she would wait for me to catch up, and then canter off again, and in this way we came at length to a great, hollow cave. By the time I came to the crevice in the cliff wall, the colt was nowhere to be seen. The cave was empty as a raised village. How I wanted to see the mare, even the horrid red fox. The chamber was empty and the walls were smooth, with no little door to let me pass, and no wolves came to greet me. If the sleepers lay still within, there was no longer any path to them. I sat on the earthen floor of the cave and called out. My voice hardly even echoed. My old bones were so weary, and I had come so far. I will admit to tears. I fell asleep there on the dirt, my fists clenched like a baby's against my mud-streaked face. He was crouching above me when I woke. "Why are you here?" he said, and his voice echoed. Oh, how it echoed. He was a man whose skin was like paper, whiter than paper, paler than any mortal skin, like snow over snow. His hair fell long and straight to his waist, and over his shoulder was slung a large and barbed harpoon of bone. His eyes glowered golden, and his bent legs were covered in silvery tattoos, a whipping, curving tongue I could not read. Now, I know my grass, and I know my leaves, and I know my stories. Lakea, the harpoon star, could hardly stare me in the face, but I would know him. "Why do you come to this place?" he demanded. "It is not for you, not any more. Go. Go home." His scorn burned me as surely as a flame. "I came because of my mother, to find the wolf star and the light." "You do not have claim to that light any longer. It is all used up. Go back to your love potions and leave us alone. We are not a fountain at which you may casually drink." "And where did you go?" "The wolf, the sleepers, where's the mare?" His face colored angrily. "The last girl came and went. This place is spent. It had a life like any tree or beast. It was born when 2 sisters died here and fed their gifts to a third, and ended when a horsewoman touched a fox without permission. The mare, as you call her, has probably already forgotten it existed, and Liulfer, my kin, not yours, went back to the sky to put those bodies in their graves to do what stars do for sisters and cousins and kin. Go home. There is nothing for you here." "But I have looked for this place all my life." I spread my empty, grubby hands. "I do not care. Why do you awful creatures insist that we care for every little thing you do?" The star let out a terrible wail, his beautiful face contorting in grief, his head thrown back, tears streaming from his eyes like lightning. One of you killed my sister. If I could, I would tear all of you apart for one glimpse of her whole again. I did not kill your sister, I growled. It doesn't matter. When you look into the sky, do you see our faces? No, you see a multitude, all the same. So it is when I look at you. My sister's body lies within where the sleepers were. She is more holy in her smallest blink than the lot of them, and she deserves this place no less than they, but I will not let any little girls drink from her like a cup. I didn't mean that. But I was young when I began, and now I am old. If I do not take the light soon, I will die, and my family will perish in the dark. It is not yours to take. It never was. This is not about your family. It is about mine. He paused for a moment, his alabaster jaw set hard. If you are unafraid of the dark, would you pay for the light your grandmothers took? I will give you one last time the light you seek, if you are willing to barter for it. Yes, anything. Well, that is a foolish promise. But foolishness is not only the province of the young. He knelt before me, and I did not know what to do, but his eyes were huge, vast pools of gold and pleading. Find her. Find her and tell me where we go. Tell me what happens to us. Tell me she is at peace. Tell her I love her. Tell her I tried to protect her. I cannot bear to think of her alone. His voice broke, and he was as miserable as a child lost in a dark wood. Tell her I miss her so. With that, he drew back his harpoon and thrust it into my heart. The tale of the crossing continued. The tale of the crossing concluded. Zemea's eyes were full of green tears. I miss him too. He put his harpoon into me, and more light poured into my chest than my grandmother ever knew. It burned me through and through like scalding oil poured down my throat. I felt it screaming in me and called out my mother's name. I felt it screaming in me and called out my brother's name and my grandmother's and all the names of my flock. The silver came bubbling up out of my mouth like blood, and he drew back the blade. Zemea was nodding. He never gave up more than a cupful of his light. He still burns where he walks, as we all did in the earliest days. It was enough, so that I seemed to the ferryman a star, and he brought me here, where I aimed. How much did you pay him? Seven asked. Harry blinked. Idle, what did you pay him to ferry you across? How much did you bleed for the harpy? The witch woman laughed. Coins are for the living, boy. For those who shouldn't be here. For carrying back those who shouldn't be there. Blood is for those who have no business on this lake. There are other ways of getting to this place, namely by dying. Lakeia offered to cut my throat as quickly as possible, but I knew a faster way. I loosed my lucrata sash from my waist and fell down as dead as when my brother snapped my neck. And here I am, half goose, as I always was. We have an agreement. I will ferry back to him what he seeks, and he will tie it on again at the new moon. She looked the snake star up and down. So, seeing that you require my more mundane skills, I hope it pleases the child to come out sooner rather than later. She crouched down and spoke directly to the heavy bulge in the serpent skin. Do you hear that, little one? We showed Aerie the island and cautioned her not to eat the red fruits if she meant to go back. She and Zemea talked at length, cloistered together like novices, their heads bent, long wings folded around long scales. The serpent asked how she could possibly be with child. The goose asked if she had pains, chills, aches in her feet. It happened that they were conversing in this way when Zemea cried out, her voice in the mist, like eggs cracking, and fell against one of the gray houses, clutching her stomach. The house yielded hurriedly, cupping her back in its wall. The Ito twins came running, their red feet throwing up pebbles, and caught her up in their arms, whispering to her and stroking her hair and cooing against her neck. They cradled her against them as she pressed her cool snake's cheeks to theirs, 14 wan, wispy lights peered out from behind thin trees, frightened and flickering. Aerie only shrugged and set to her work, her wings nearly as deft as hands. It did not hurt like this before, with the others, Zemea said, shuddering. You are dead. Your body does not want to give up this hot little clutch of life. It wants to keep it. Seven and Oubliette looked on from a distance, and it seemed to them a terrible birth. Zemea's shrieking shot out over the shacks, bleak and rasping. Her feet kicked out onto the ground, and a sickly light spilled from her as blood might from a living woman. But finally there was a child in Aerie's wings, with great black eyes and a shock of dark hair, her skin gray and wet. Zemea held her and smoothed her daughter's hair. The 14 lights looked curiously over her shoulders. One of the Ito twins put out his ruddy grained finger, and the baby gripped it, her fist sure. What will you call her? Aerie said. Names are so terribly important, you know. I shall call her Sorrow, whispered the serpent after a long while. I shall give her now a surfeit of sadness, and hope that it will pay in one stroke for happiness for all her days. Perhaps she will have more days than my other children. The 14 lights dimmed a little, but not much. But it was not to be. The child was sickly, ill, her cheeks hollow. No matter how the serpent tried to nurse her hatchling, her breasts would not fill. No light came filtering through the branches to illumine her, to feed her. The babe's breath was hot in the air, her wails bright and cutting, the only living thing on the isle of shades and stars, and the interlopers halfway between. The child had no light anyone could see, and her little lips trembled in the cold, showing pink gums, no more than a cold, hungry little girl. Sorrow could not be fed, and she slowly wasted, becoming thinner and thinner, while Aerie waited for the new moon. What's wrong with her? Zemea begged for answers. Aerie sighed. You are dead. You cannot feed a child with your hard, cold flesh. You cannot expect the child of dead stars to glitter and gleam. She will die here, the only thing ever born of the land of the dead. And Zemea wept, bitter and keen. The lights around her flashed in grief. Please, Aerie, take her. Put her on the raft, and when your sash is tight round you again, go quickly to the mourning beast by the glass-strewn lake which Oubliette and Seven sought, and take her from the cave. You can have a cave at last, all your own. You cannot watch another child fade to nothing. Aerie pursed her lips. You did not want her, you know. It would be no worse than if you never had her at all. Zemea drew herself up, her face grave. Do not try to shame me, woman. A hole was chewed in me, and out she came, and she deserves a chance to step down out of the dark as I did. She is my girl, delicate and small as a grass star, and I love her. I do love her. One of the Itos, the one with the child's voice, touched Sorrow's damp hair. She is ours too, and we love her, and she ought not to perish here where no one can see what sort of beast a snake and a ship can make together. Take her. What is it you would have me do? I am too old to rear a child grown. I do not think Lacheia is the fathering type. Zemea considered. He would shut her away so no one could ever harm her, and she would never see the sun. Care for her yourself, I would ask you, or if you cannot find a family whose child is dead, and bear her into their open arms. Or take her to a family with linens and a new crib and jewels in their hair, with hearts that are fierce and sweet, and put her in their cradle in place of their daughter, like a magpie with secret eggs. Find the mortal girl a home in some far-off kingdom. Take her to a childless creature who might love her like its own young. Take her away. Let Sorrow grow up happy and whole and fed, warm by a fire and in sight of the sky. The twins stood on the mended dock and cupped their scarlet hands around their mouths. They made a long, desolate sound, like foghorns on a lonely bay. Seven and Oubliette held hands, and Aerie flared her wings in anticipation. The fairy parted the fog not long after. Zemea bundled her daughter onto the raft, her tears splashing on the infant's face. What is it you think you're doing? It'll asked. I do not bear passengers without payment, and I am not fond of being summoned like a maid. The assembled throng looked from one to another. What payment can there be on this isle? The deep-throated Ito asked helplessly. Slowly, Seven drew out a single yellow coin of old bone, smoothed by his fingers. It bore a faint spider sigil. Oubliette looked at him, her eyebrows raised. "Is this child worth so much to you?" she asked. "No," he said simply. "But I ate the apples the first night I was here. I'm sorry I lied, but you would have kept me from it. I know you will never leave her, and now I cannot either. I do not wish to. I will never leave you, not in any gray city. I will stand by you, and you will not be alone." Oubliette threw back her disheveled head and laughed. "I ate the plantains that night, too, the first night you were here." Seven squeezed her hand and gave over the coin to the ferryman without looking at it, without weighing it in his palm. Idle frowned and turned it over in his hands. His forehead was creased with concern and disapproval, but he allowed the child to be tucked into his bony arm. Zemea and the twins held each other up in the midst of the 14 lights, and they kissed their daughter over and over. As the ferry drifted off from the shore of eyes, Aerie smiled faintly and pressed her cheek to the serpent's. "Don't worry, my dear. I know just where to take her, and I will tell your brother that you are beautiful still." She looked around and back toward the beachhead and the distant houses, and not alone in the least. As they watched, the goosewoman's waist cinched itself in, a thickening band of red appearing like a bloody fog, and by the time it seemed solid enough to touch, she was gone. The ferry drifted beyond the mist, leaving them alone on the dock, grim and grieving as a funeral. We have an illustration of Idle here. In the garden. The boy clasped her hands in his. The moon was so high and bright that it scrubbed their faces in silver like an industrious nursemaid. A stiff wind lashed the poplar branches, and the cattails rattled their woody cacophony. The girl sat in the midst of her wood, as red in her cloak as the first sun of winter. "What happened to the child?" he cried. "Where did Aerie take her? Was she beautiful when she grew up, a warrior like all Zemea's other daughters?" The girl laughed, her smile broad and glad in the night, starlight dancing on her lap, her dark eyelids rippling slightly like the surface of a little garden lake. The boy blushed, and the girl thought that she liked that best of all, when he could not contain how much he wanted to hear her speak, when he broached his etiquette and eagerness. The blue night shone on his cheeks in patches, and his breath had frosted in the air. Somewhere behind them a fish jumped and splashed down with a tinkling noise. "If you will return to the garden and to me, I shall tell you, and things even more strange and wonderful," she grinned. The girl pulled the bird of pearl from the folds of the black wolf tails and tugged on its sapphire tail. It chimed out the midnight hour, long and clear and sweet. And that is the end of the Book of the Storm. We will start next week with the Book of the Scald. Next week, this Sunday, not next week. There we have that. And my popsicle is 100,000% melted to liquid. Does anyone have any questions? We've only got the one book left. We're 3 out of 4 down. Did I beat the heat? Did I? This drink is just water. The drink fairy tricked me. I'm glad that you guys liked it. It's a nice little thing. It, bring Aerie back around. All of my books have these little family units in them. And I guess this one was the first one of that. Well, if nobody has any questions, I'll do my outro stuff. If you have questions, you can throw them up while I'm talking. As always, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This is a play. You can get copies of these books at your local independent booksellers' web portals. Mine is printbookstore.com. If you'd like to patronize them, you can get music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can find me on Twitter at Kat Valente. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Kat Valente as well. You can catch up in the archive on YouTube at Kat Valente Live. And if you would like to, if you'd like to toss a coin to your witch, you can put something in my tip jar on my Instagram profile page, my YouTube profile page, or my website, which is katherinemvalente.com. You don't have to, but times are very tight for freelancers, and anything that you can contribute would be deeply appreciated. Thank you all so much for coming to these, and on Sunday we'll start on the last book. And I guess it'll be 13 nights, just about, to finish that last book, which means we're just about at 6.5 weeks left. So what does that mean? That means we'll be finishing up, I guess, right around end of September, right around Sebastian's birthday. So that'll be very nice. Any thoughts on finishing a new book? I desperately want to finish this book. It has been hanging over my head for so long. There was like a pregnancy in the middle of writing this book, and so it's been just like weighing so heavily on me. So I just can't wait to be finished with it. My cat wanted to be part of everything, also always wants food, but mainly he wanted to be on camera. But he's gigantic, so if you were to jump up here, he was pulling at the light at one point. But yeah, he would for certain ruin my lap and everything. He is huge. Yeah, there's more babies and birds. That's the Orphan's Tale subtitle, babies and birds. I do not know what my deal with that was, but apparently that was on the brain. As I say, like, the strangest thing about it is that I was adamantly child-free when I wrote this book. So, like, I had no intention of ever having children, but I was just writing about it constantly. Who knows? Who can speak to the mindset of 22-year-olds? Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'll see you guys on Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. Love you all. I'll see you soon.